This is the most disturbing movie of 2024. When a down-on-her-luck actress tries her luck on an experimental beauty drug, it turns her into a monster and produces dire results that will leave you speechless. This is the 2024 movie, The Substance. The movie starts with someone inoculating an egg yolk, and it grows into two. Then we see the name Elizabeth Sparkle being placed on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and then Elizabeth is celebrated. But as time passes, the star gets cracked, and a guy even spills food on it. Then we cut to the present day, and Elizabeth Sparkle is hosting her morning workout show called Sparkle Your Life. When she's done with the show, she walks down a hallway with all her photos on the wall and everyone wishing her a happy birthday. She tries to go to the female bathroom, but it's out of order, so she uses the male bathroom. As she goes into one of the stalls, her manager Harvey walks into the bathroom and uses the urinal. He's on the phone talking about replacing her ASAP with someone younger and prettier, and how he plans to kick Elizabeth to the curb. And then he leaves. Elizabeth comes out of the stall, and she's visibly distraught. Then we cut to a restaurant where she's having lunch with Harvey, who is really disgusting when he eats shrimp. He talks about replacing her as giving the people what they want, and when she starts questioning him, he awkwardly leaves. Then we see Elizabeth driving home, and she sees someone taking down her face on a billboard, and while she's distracted, her car gets hit by a truck. At the hospital, the doctor says she's okay and uninjured. He wishes her a happy birthday, and she starts crying. Behind her, there's another younger and more handsome doctor watching her. When the main doctor leaves, the young doctor starts examining her spine and tells her she's a great candidate. Elizabeth sees the scars on his right arm as he hands her her coat and says goodbye. Outside the hospital, Elizabeth notices a flash drive with the word "The Substance" on it and a number on the other side. Behind that, there's a paper with the words, "It changed my life." Then an old friend, Fred, from high school comes to say hello. He tells her she's beautiful and asks if they could have a drink sometime. She asks for his number and he gives it to her after making a fool of himself. She goes back to an apartment where she's lost in thought. She plays the video on the flash drive, and it advertises a drug that will help release a better version of yourself through cellular division, called The Substance. It's said that the substance will help you create a new you, but you will have to share time. 1 week for yourself and 1 week for the new you. But the two of you are one. After the video ends, she throws away the flash drive. She goes to a bar and drinks alone. She starts throwing up later and even throws a snow globe with her identity at a big portrait of herself in frustration. She retrieves the flash drive from the trash and calls the number. A voice picks up and she says she wants to order. He asks for her address, she tells him, and he gives her an address and she writes it down. She wakes up the next morning all hungover as she sees ads for her replacement in the newspaper. As she checks through her mail, she sees an envelope from The Substance with the number 503. She goes to the address on her palm, and it's on a sketchy street at a sketchy building. She uses her card to open the door. She goes into the place and sees a room with a bunch of storage lockers. She opens the one with her number and retrieves a package from inside of it. When she opens the package back in her apartment, there's the activating serum, a stabilizer, something called a switch, and then there's a package called Food the Matrix and Food Other Self. The rules are you activate once, you stabilize every day, you switch every 7 days without exception, and you must remember that you are one. She goes to the bathroom and looks at herself. It's really graphic, so I can't show you the whole thing. She takes a drag from the activator and injects it. Then she collapses and starts writhing in pain. But here's where things start to get creepy. Her pupils split into two, her back splits open, and a new human being crawls out. She stands up and sees Elizabeth on the floor. The new girl looks at herself in the mirror, and she looks hella fine. Sadly, we can't show you the whole thing, but she's stunning. She sees Elizabeth on the floor and sews her back shut, takes a shower, and after that, she starts bleeding from her nose, and it seems like she's about to die. She realizes that she needs to stabilize, so she takes a syringe and inserts it in Elizabeth's spine and takes her spinal fluid and injects herself, and she stabilizes. She starts working out with her new body and then decides to apply as the new Elizabeth. She goes outside and buys a spanking new workout outfit, applies for the part, and introduces herself as Sue. Harvey meets her immediately and tells her she has the part. Sue informs him that she has to be away every other week, and the manager says they'll work around it. She starts practicing for the part and gets a bunch of people working with her, and every day she stabilizes. She takes out all of Elizabeth's clothes and puts in new ones. By day 7, the food matrix she injected into Elizabeth had run out. She uses the switch, which mixes both their blood together, and hands over control to Elizabeth. Elizabeth wakes up disoriented and with back pain. She fixes herself something to eat and injects the food other self into Sue's body. She goes back to her work, and all her pictures have been taken down. The manager gives her her belongings and passively fires her, but gives her a cookbook as a going-away present. Elizabeth goes back home, maps out a calendar for herself, and then spends her time watching TV. She receives a letter that tells her her refill has been delivered. She goes to her deposit box, retrieves the food refill, and switches with Sue. Sue starts living her young and happy life. She doesn't like the fact that Elizabeth is lying in the bathroom, so she creates a secret room in the bathroom for her. She gets disturbed by a neighbor, Oliver, complaining about the noise, and he's awestruck and in love when he sees her. Sue drags Lizzie into the secret room. Then she films her new show called Pump It Up with Sue. I have to say it was crazy to see. It was very erotic, and it was hard to believe that this was supposed to be a workout show. After she's done, everyone celebrates. She goes back home, gets ready for a party, and leaves even though it's time to switch and Elizabeth's food is running out. Sue goes back home and is trying to sleep with a biker guy. Meanwhile, Elizabeth is suffering, and then she starts to destabilize. She realizes that she has to switch, but instead, she takes more spinal fluid and stabilizes. She goes back to the room and tries to sleep with the guy, but as she's doing that, something gross and disgusting comes out of her spine. It turns out it was just a dream. Elizabeth wakes up and she's disoriented. She looks around her apartment and finds it in a mess, and the biker guy left his helmet. Then she notices her hand. Her right index finger looks like it is rotten. Turns out Sue used more time than she should have, and it has consequences for Elizabeth. She calls the substance number to complain. He tells her there's no way to reverse it. He tells her they are one and that she should respect the balance to prevent any more inconveniences. Outside her window, a sign of Sue's new show has been put up. As she cleans her apartment, she watches Sue's new show, and she's visibly angry. Oliver rings her doorbell and asks if Sue can come get a drink. Elizabeth doesn't open the door, so he leaves. Elizabeth goes to get her refill, and she notices that someone is following her. She goes to a diner and sees an old man staring at her. Then it's revealed that he's the imperfect version of the hot doctor she met at the hospital with the scar on his hand. He's number 207. He says he's curious to see how things are going, and he says that Sue is going to start eating her. When Elizabeth goes home, she calls Fred's number, and he's in shock that she called him and they set up a date. She gets ready and she's looking good. But every time she's about to leave, she looks at Sue, applies more makeup, and gets more insecure. It got so bad that she didn't even go on a date because she was disgusted with how she looked. Then we see Sue filming her show. As she starts dancing, working out, she feels a pop on her thighs and stops. The show directors say they saw something bizarre, and everyone goes to the monitor to look at it. Sue goes to her dressing room and notices a huge lump on her behind. She starts moving the lump around her body up to her stomach. Then she places her hand through her navel and pulls out a drumstick. It's disgusting, but it turns out that was also a dream. When she wakes up, she sees that Elizabeth has made a mess around the apartment. She gets angry and calls the substance number to complain and hangs up. She goes to film her show, but the filming has been canceled. She gets called in by Harvey, and he tells her they can't keep her on the morning show because the ratings are too high. So he offers her the network's New Year's Eve show, which is the highest point on the network. So Sue goes back home and starts taking more and more spinal fluid from Elizabeth. When she finally switches to Elizabeth, Elizabeth is distraught. Half of her body is disfigured, and she looks old as hell, kind of like a witch. She calls the substance number to complain, and he asks her if she would like to stop. She says no, that she hates her regular self and she wants to keep going. Later, she struggles to get out of the chair because her knees get dislocated. She realigns her knees and notices the cookbook that Harvey gave to her. She starts cooking some French cuisine as she watches Sue do an interview. She gets enraged at Sue for basically stealing her life and trashes the entire apartment. When she switches back to Sue, Sue gets pissed and takes out a ton of jars and drains a bunch of spinal fluid from Elizabeth. This scene was really hard to watch. Watching pierce Elizabeth's spine again and again was really disturbing. But it gets worse. Sue continues to live her glamorous life for God knows how long until one day she tries to get more spinal fluid and there's nothing left. She calls the substance number and she complains, and he tells her that she's surpassed her allotted time, that in order for her to survive, she needs to switch so that spinal fluid will be replenished in the real Elizabeth. Sue says no because the New Year show is the next day, but since she's in pain, she switches back. That's when we see what's become of Elizabeth. I don't even know if we're allowed to show this, but Elizabeth looks horrible. She looks like a hunchback golem, and she was in a lot of pain. Meanwhile, Sue has her boyfriend on the bed waiting for her. He hears Elizabeth scream in the bathroom and thinks something is wrong with Sue. He tries to get in, and when he hears Elizabeth's monster-like growl, he runs out of the apartment. Elizabeth calls the substance number and says she wants to terminate the experiment. The guy says okay. Elizabeth drags her old portrait back to her living room. Then she receives mail that tells her a package has been dropped in her deposit box. She goes out of her apartment and tells Oliver to F off. She retrieves the package, and when she opens it at home, it's a termination serum. She inserts it into Sue. Then she instantly regrets it and remembers what it's like being a superstar, so she tries to get Sue back. She takes the switch and tries to switch with Sue, but something strange happens. This time, both Sue and Elizabeth end up being awake. They look at each other in shock, and when Sue sees the termination syringe on the floor, she gets angry and starts to fight with Elizabeth. They fight around the apartment, even into the bathroom. Sue uses Elizabeth's head to smash a mirror. It was really hard to watch. Then an injured Elizabeth crawls to the living room, and Sue beats the crap out of her even more until she dies. Sue then goes for the New Year's show, but midway through the event, she goes to the bathroom and her tooth starts to fall out. She rushes out of the event. She meets Harvey on her way out. He introduces her to the shareholders and tells her to smile. She does without showing her teeth, and then she runs to the elevator. By this time, her fingernails and her ears start to fall off, and even her vision starts to blur. She goes back home and injects herself with the activator fluid, praying to see a better version of herself. The serum activates, but what comes out is a disgusting monster with Elizabeth's face, and her face called Monstro Elisa Shue. Elisa Shue then dresses up and puts on her earrings. She cuts out Elizabeth's face from her picture and puts it on her face. Somehow she gets welcomed as she goes to the show. She makes it to the show and starts hallucinating people greeting her. She goes to the main show, and Elisa Shue comes out on stage, but then the poster falls off, and then her eye falls off, and the entire crowd is freaked out. They start attacking her, her faces gets blown off, and a new hideous set of faces grow out. Everyone starts freaking out. Elisa Shue starts to fall apart, and her blood sprays everyone. It's total pandemonium. Then we find out that this was all a hallucination. The real Elisa Shue is still trying to make it to the show. On her way there, she falls apart. All that's left is a hideous blob with Elizabeth's face. The blob crawls and crawls to the Elizabeth Sparkles Hollywood star sign, and there she stays reminiscing about the glory days until she melts into a puddle of blood. By the next day, the blood gets wiped away by a cleaner, and that ends the tale of Elizabeth Sparkle.